Welcome back. We're pretty much halfway through the book of Matthew, the first book in the New Testament in the Christian Bible. Chapter 14. This is going to get graphic. John the Baptist beheaded. At that time, Herod the Tetrarch, so the leader, ruler, heard the news about Jesus and said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He himself has been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him." And that's because he killed John the Baptist, and now he thought Jesus is him resurrected. Strange. For when Herod had John arrested a few chapters ago, he bound him and put him in prison because of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip. For John had been saying to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her as your woman." Although Herod wanted to put him to death, he feared the crowd because they regarded John as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Dumb move. And after being prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter." And although he was grieved, the king commanded it to be given because of his oaths and his dinner guests. So he had to give his word. He sent word and had John beheaded in the prison. And his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. John's disciples came and took away the body and buried it, and they went and reported to Jesus. Now when Jesus heard about John, he withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. And when the people heard about this, they followed him on foot from the cities. When he came ashore, he saw a large crowd and felt compassion for them and healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This place is secluded and the hour is already past to eat. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, "They do not need to go. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We have nothing here except 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." And ordering the crowds to sit down on the grass, he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looked up toward heaven. He blessed the food, and breaking the loaves, he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 full baskets. There were about 5,000 men who ate, besides women and children, so more than 5,000. Immediately afterward, he compelled the disciples to get into the boat and to go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the crowds away. So remember how they were kind of living around and migrating around the Galilee Sea. So they were traveling by boat. After he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, between 3 and 6 a.m., he came to them walking on the sea. So he walked faster on the sea to reach them than the boat traveled in this storm. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, walking on water, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter responded and said to him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So imagine 3 to 6 a.m., tired, probably a bit hazy because it's really late and you haven't slept in a while and it's late in the morning. Quite a weird question to ask from a ghost to test and see if it's Jesus. And Jesus said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. And he did it. He walked on water. But seeing the wind, he became frightened, and when he began to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me! Immediately Jesus reached out with his hand and took hold of him and said to him, You of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind stopped. So if he hadn't doubt, he could have walked on water. He could have done the unnatural. And those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, You are truly God's son. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret, and when the men of that place recognized him, they sent word into all that surrounding region and brought to him all who were sick. And they pleaded with him that they might just touch the border of his cloak, so just touch his clothes a bit, and all who touched it were cured. Just touched his clothes and they were cured. It was not like this weird comprehensive ritual. Faith is powerful. That was chapter 14. Chapter 15. Then some Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem, so the religious capital of Israel, and said, Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. And he answered and said to them, Why do you yourselves also break the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, Honor your father and mother, and the one who speaks evil of father or mother is to be put to death. But you say, Whoever says to his father or mother, Whatever I have that would help you has been given to God. He is not to honor his father or mother. And by this, you have invalidated the word of God for the sake of your tradition. So they're pretty much saying, oh, we're not going to help you because we took that portion away to God, so we have nothing left for you. Because in reality, they didn't really want to help their parents. You hypocrites, rightly did Isaiah prophesy about you by saying, This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me, and in vain do they worship me, teaching us doctrines, the commandments of man. So not the will of God, but the will of man. They're made up ideas and rules and oppression. After Jesus called the crowd to him, he said to them, Hear and understand, it is not what enters the mouth that defiles the person, so making the person dirty, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles the person. Then the disciples came and said to him, Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this statement? But he answered and said, Every plant which my heavenly Father did not plant will be uprooted. Leave them alone. They are blind guides of blind people. And if a person who is blind guides another who is blind, both will fall into a pit. Peter said to him, Explain the parable to us. Jesus said, Are you also still lacking in understanding? Do you not understand that everything that goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is eliminated, as in the toilet? But the things that come out of the mouth come from the heart, and those things defile the person. So like sins. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, acts of adultery, other immoral sexual acts, thefts, false testimonies, and slanderous statements. These are the things that defile the person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile the person. The faith of a Canaanite woman, that is, a woman who is not Israelite, she is a foreigner. Jesus went away from there and withdrew into the region of Tyre and Sidon. And a Canaanite woman from that region came out and began to cry out, saying, Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed. But he did not answer her with even a word. And his disciples came up and urged him, saying, Send her away, because she keeps shouting at us. But he answered and said, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So only to the Israelites, to speak to the Israelites. But she came and began to bow down before him, saying, Lord, help me, she insisted. Yet he answered and said, It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Quite a test of humility and faith here. And she said, "Yes, Lord. But please help, for even the dogs feed on the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "Oh, woman, your faith is great. It shall be done for you as you desire." And her daughter was healed at once, as in immediately. Departing from there, Jesus went along the Sea of Galilee, and after going up on the mountain, he was sitting there. And large crowds came to him, bringing with them those who were limping, had impaired limbs, were blind, or were unable to speak, and many others, and they laid them down at his feet, and he healed them. So the crowd was astonished as they saw those who were unable to speak talking, those who with impaired limbs restored, those who were limping walking around, and those who were blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. Now Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I feel compassion for the people because they have remained with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on the way." The disciples said to him, "Where would we get so many loaves in this desolate place to satisfy such a large crowd?" And Jesus said to them, "How many loaves do you have? How many loaves do you have? What's in your wallet?" I'm joking. And they said, "7 and a few small fish." And he directed the people to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and after giving thanks, he broke them and started giving them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 7 large baskets full. And those who ate were 4,000 men, besides men and women, so more than 4,000 people. And sending away the crowds, Jesus got into the boat and came to the region of Magadan. Chapter 16. Pharisees and Sadducees test Jesus, so the religious VIPs. The Pharisees and Sadducees came up, and putting Jesus to the test, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. But he replied to them, when it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, there'll be a storm today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to discern the appearance of the sky, but you are unable to discern the signs of the times? As in, you know the prophecies, you memorize them, and you don't recognize that they're happening right now, that I am the Messiah. Hello? An evil and adulterous generation wants a sign, so a sign will not be given to it except the sign of Jonah. And he left them and went away. So the sign of Jonah is in he would be crucified, die, and buried for 3 days, just as Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days. But if they paid attention, they might be able to understand it when the time comes, but probably not. And the disciples came to the other side of the sea, but they had forgotten to bring any bread. And Jesus said to them, watch out and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees. They began to discuss this among themselves, saying, he said that because we did not bring any bread. But Jesus, aware of this, said, you men of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet understand, nor remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you picked up? Nor the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many large baskets you picked up? How is it that you do not understand that I did not speak to you about bread, but beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees? Then they understood that he did not say to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Peter's confession of Christ. Now when Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he was asking his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man, as in me, Christ, is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. He said to them, but who do you yourselves say that I am? Simon Peter, yet again, answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said to him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, which means rock. And upon this rock, upon you, Peter, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, the death, the place where the dead live, rest, not live, will not overpower it. The gates of Hades will not overpower it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Then he gave the disciples strict orders that they were to tell no one that he was the Christ. From that time, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and to suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and to be killed and to be raised up on the third day. And yet Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are not setting your mind on God's purposes, but man's. That's because people didn't understand yet what it means to be Messiah, and that him being crucified is a necessary part of his mission. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what good will it do a person if he gains the whole world, but forfeits his soul? Or what will a person give in exchange for his soul? It's priceless. For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and will then repay every person according to his deeds at the end of the world. Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Chapter 17, the Transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John. Peter, James, and John. Top 3. They were his disciples. Peter, James, and John, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments, his clothes, became as white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him, with Jesus. Peter responded and said to Jesus, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you want, I will make 3 tabernacles here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Same thing as it happened at the baptism of Jesus. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground and were terrified. God spoke to them himself. And Jesus came to them and touched them and said, Get up and do not be afraid. And raising their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. When they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead, as if they knew what that meant. And his disciples asked him, Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And he answered and said, Elijah is coming and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah already came, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wanted. So also the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. So he probably is referring to John the Baptist, as he kind of said John the Baptist is Elijah in some shape or form. Then the disciples understood that he had spoken to them about John the Baptist. There you go. The demon-possessed boy. When they came to the crowd, a man came up to Jesus, falling on his knees before him and saying, "Lord, have mercy on my son, because he has seizures and suffers terribly, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water. And I brought him to your disciples, and they could not cure him." And Jesus answered and said to his disciples, I guess, "You unbelieving and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him here to me." It's like, if you couldn't do it, I'll do it. And Jesus rebuked him, and the demon came out of him, and the boy was healed at once. Boom. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "Because of your meager, as in weak, faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed," really tiny, "you will say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. And nothing will be impossible for you if you have faith." As in, believe it and it will be. Don't believe it and it won't be. Fascinating. And while they were gathering together in Galilee, Jesus said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be handed over to men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day." And they were deeply grieved. Now when they came to Capernaum, those who collected the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the 2 drachma tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, "What do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth collect customs or poll tax? From their sons or from strangers?" When Peter said from strangers, Jesus said to him, "Then the sons are exempt. However, so that we do not offend them, go to the sea and throw in a hook and take the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you will find a stater," which is like some sort of money, some sort of currency. "Take that and give it to them for you and me." So tax for the 2 of us. Go fish it out of a fish's mouth and pay taxes. God provides in ways that might not make any absolute sense. The story doesn't have to follow the logical, rational pattern of things. Amazing. That was chapter 17. Chapter 18. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Their ego started to, they started wondering about their ego and status. And he called the child to himself and set him among them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you change and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So whoever will humble himself like this child, he is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it is better for him that a heavy millstone be hung around his neck and that he be drowned in the depths of the sea." That is graphic. So what he's saying is we have to have that faith and innocence and humility and curiosity of a child when it comes to learning about God and believing in God, not the status craving ego of most adults. It's not about that. Woe to the world because of its stumbling blocks, for it is inevitable that stumbling blocks come. But woe to the person through whom the stumbling block comes, as in the temptation that makes somebody do something wrong. And if your hand or your foot is causing you to sin, Cut it off and throw it away from you. It is better for you to enter life maimed or without a foot than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into the eternal fire. Don't cut your hands. I'm not asking you to cut your hands or feet. But I'm just reading. It's not everything is literal in the Bible. It might mean something else. And if your eye is causing you to sin, tear it out and throw it away from you. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the fiery hell. See that you do not look down on one of these little ones, for I say to you that their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father who is in heaven. Their angels in heaven continuously see the face of my Father who is in heaven. It's almost like we have angels in heaven, like guardian angels who advocate for us. Isn't that interesting? They're angels in heaven. What do you think? If any man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, so gets lost, will he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go and search for the one that is lost? The math doesn't make sense, because it's like you can lose 1 sheep or you can lose 99. So you're gonna go look for the single sheep and leave the 99 behind. But this is metaphorical. It's a figure of speech. He's not talking about sheep. He's talking about humans who need salvation, who are lost, who are not in faith anymore. So, and if it turns out that he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that have not gone astray. He's not going to sit there and beat up the sheep for getting lost. He's going to love and save it. So it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven for one of these little ones to perish. God wants all of us to be saved and find faith, find Him. Now, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. And if he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take 1 or 2 more with you, so that on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses every matter may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, he is to be with you, to you, as a Gentile and a tax collector. So, if he's not correcting himself, have no business with him anymore. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Again I say to you that if 2 of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who is in heaven. So there's power in numbers. For where 2 or 3 have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst. Powerful. Forgiveness. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how many times shall my brother sin against me, and I still forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, that's because they had so many rules about everything, that's why he asked that question. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 77 times. For this, so 77 times. As many times as possible. How many times can someone wrong to you? For this reason, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his slaves. And when he had begun to settle them, one who owed him 10,000 talents, as in some sort of currency, was brought to him. That's a lot. But since he did not have the means to repay, his master commanded that he be sold, along with his wife and children and all that he had, and repayment be made. This is something that was in the Judaic law back in the day. So the slave fell to the ground and prostrated himself before him, saying, Have patience with me and I'll repay you everything. And the master of that slave felt compassion, and he released him and forgave him the debt. But that slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves, who owed him 100 denarii, very little. And he seized him and began to choke him, saying, "Pay back what you owe me." So this fellow slave fell to the ground and began to plead with him, saying, "Have patience with me and I'll repay you." But he was unwilling and went and threw him in prison until he would pay back what was owed. Lack of forgiveness. So when his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were deeply grieved and came and reported to their master all that had happened. Then summoning him, his master said to him, "You wicked slave! I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not also have had mercy on your fellow slave in the same way that I had mercy on you?" And his master, moved with anger, handed him over to the torturers until he would repay all that was owed him. My heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive his brother or people from your heart. We're all sinners who are forgiven. We are to forgive others as well, because there's no amount of evil that someone could do to us that is enough to the amount of the totality of all the sins, mistakes we ever did that God forgave us in our entire life. And he says your brother. He doesn't say just anyone, because not everybody is your brother in faith, but your brother in faith, somebody who shares the same faith with you. We're not talking about all kinds of criminals here. We're talking about people of faith.